Welcome. What a great crowd. This is Beaches Watch's monthly meeting. I'm Maria Mark, the president of Beaches Watch now. I welcome you along with our board members. You're in for a very, well, I won't say exciting, but a very informative topic tonight about sea level rise. And since we all live on a barrier island, I think it's pretty pertinent and germane to us. On our panel, we have Lisa Reineman, who is your St. Johns River keeper. She will be moderating the panel. We will also have Chris Hong, who is a reporter for the Florida Times Union, and Dr. Quint White, I should know that, Dr. Quint White from Jacksonville University Marine Science Research Institute sitting on the panel. So we will start with that in just a few minutes after I make some announcements. But we can go ahead and have the panelists come up and sit, go and take their seats, or you want to wait? Okay, we'll wait till after the announcements. So, like all of our meetings, they are being videotaped and will be uploaded to our website tomorrow. So if you missed something or you wanted to hear it again, please check out the video on our website. We also like to recognize our elected officials who come to these meetings. They do a great job for us here in the city, so we like to recognize them when we can. From Atlantic Beach, we'd like to recognize Mayor Ellen Glasser. And let me just say, just hold your applause till after I announce everybody, because we have a lot of elected officials tonight, which is a great thing. We have Atlantic Beach Commissioner Candace Kelly, Atlantic Beach Commissioner Brittany Norris, and we have the City Manager Joe Garrity. From Jacksonville Beach, we have City Council Person Sandy Golding and City Council Person Chris Hoffman, and we have the former City Manager George Forbes. From Neptune Beach, we have City Council Member Josh Messenger and City Council Member Scott Wiley. We also have City Manager Andy Hyatt and their City Attorney Patrick Krachowski. We have from the U.S. Congress John Rutherford's office. We have Director of Special Ops Jackie Smith. That's really a special title there. We also have former Mayor of Neptune Beach and our former City of Jacksonville Council Member Dick Brown. And let's see, did I miss anybody?
Atlantic Beach new Commissioner.
New Commissioner Cindy Anderson. Thank you. Yes, welcome. Anybody else of significance, of importance who would like to be recognized in this moment? Okay, let's go ahead for our Okay, so as we announced it, if you hopefully got an agenda when you signed in, and because this is being videotaped, I am going to sort of run through the items on the agenda for our folks at home who will be viewing this. We're in the middle of our membership drive. It's $15 for individuals, $20 for family, and $5 for students. If you have not joined Beaches Watch or you want to renew your membership, please see Eileen Krinsky at our sign-in table. She'll be glad to take your money. The memberships run from January through December, and your membership supports some of the things that we do for the community as well. So we have our Give Back donation, which we just awarded in December. The Beaches Sea Turtle Patrol was a recipient of that award. And we also recently established a scholarship award for Fletcher High School seniors. So please think about joining our organization. We have our member social coming up and the celebration of our 15th anniversary coming up on April 3rd, 2019. This will be at the Beaches Museum, and we need volunteers to help us solicit for raffle prizes. So we generally have a lot of really great prizes and from our local vendors here at the beach. So they also support Beaches Watch in that way. We'd like to welcome our newest board member, Steve Piscatelli. Steve, where are you? In the back. he has a resume about 10 pages long, but he is a long-time Atlantic Beach resident and has done some great things. His bio is on our website, so please take a look at that, or feel free to talk to Steve. He brings a lot of different experiences and talents to our board, so we look forward to his service. Some upcoming meetings. Atlantic Beach is holding their town hall on Saturday, January 12th at 10 a.m. That'll be in the Atlantic Beach Commission Chamber. The topic is going to be on possible annexation of some property that is north of Dutton Island from the city of Jacksonville. This is part of the initiative to work on the Mayport corridor and improving that area. And we feel like if we can annex some of that property, that'll really help with the economics, developing the economics of Mayport and the aesthetic beauty of that area that we are really concentrating on. So city council meeting date changes. Due to the Martin Luther King holiday, Neptune Beach and Jacksonville Beach City Council, their meetings will be moved to Tuesday, January 22nd. Let's see. Also, we're always looking for volunteers from the community. We are a volunteer board. So at the front of the podium, we have some different areas, and on the agenda we've listed some different areas where we could really use some help, really use some volunteers to bring your time, treasure, and talent to the board as well, and give back to the community. So think about that. You can see any of our board members here. We're in our, can't really see it now, but we're in these blue shirts. So feel free to talk to us after the meeting if you're interested in volunteering with us. Let's see. Oh, okay. I do have an announcement from the mayors of Atlantic Beach, Neptune, and Jax Beach. Recently, all three mayors met to talk about exactly what this topic is, about sea level rise, and different strategies that they're wanting to look at to implement as far as protecting our property, protecting our livelihood, protecting us as citizens. And they are planning to hold a symposium in the spring on this topic as well. So more details will follow. If you have any other specific questions, please feel free. You can talk to Mayor Glasser, who is here after the meeting. Okay. So the meeting, we generally end at 8 o'clock, but because this is such a big topic for us, we may extend the meeting a little bit longer. So just to let you know, because we want to give our panelists ample time to answer the questions, and we want to give you guys ample time to ask your questions. So if you will bear with us, it'll probably be about 8:15 maybe, just to let you know. So, one more recognition. I want to recognize Janelle Wilson, who's our former Jacksonville Beach City Council person, who's here. Anyone else who just arrived late that I haven't recognized yet? Okay. All right. Well, without further ado, I will let Lisa Reineman now take over as the moderator for this for the panel. Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing. These glasses were found in the ladies' room. Don't know if anyone in here belongs to them. Okay. I'll leave them here. All right, Lisa. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
And I have to tell you, thank you so much for hosting us for this important conversation. This organization energizes me every time I'm here with you. You guys are awesome. And I love what you're doing at the beaches. And this topic is a Northeast Florida issue. We all have to work together. So thank you, mayors, for having the leadership, and looking forward to your symposium later in the spring, and anything we can do to make sure we are focused on dealing and really harnessing the value of rising water. We don't be afraid. We need to make sure we're doing all we can to protect our communities. So that's the purpose of this conversation. We're going to take a deep dive into the discussion, are we ready for the next storm? We've actually been hosting these since the beginning of hurricane season last year. We launched these last summer. This is our 8th? I'm not sure, we've lost count. But the good news about it is people are coming out. People are hungry for making sure we're taking action to protect our neighborhoods, to protect our businesses, protect our communities, and all the waterways that we love. And so we're thrilled to have the participation that we've seen and happy to bring this to the beaches tonight. This conversation is focused on the St. Johns River. However, there are many common themes. There are many common opportunities for us to work together, and our panelists can dive in deeper into this discussion, as well as we can talk about some of the things you're looking at and the questions you have. And I know Dr. Clint White has some exciting news about a workshop coming up. Luckily, we were fortunate during the 2017 hurricane season. Unfortunately, though, you only have to look north or west to see what's at stake. Hurricane Florence, which brought horrible flooding to the Carolinas, killed more than 50 people, caused billions of dollars in property damage, and shattered all-time rainfall and flood records in both states. Hurricane Michael killed more than 40 people, made landfall along the Panhandle, nearly a Category 5 storm, packing 155-mile-per-hour winds, and was the strongest storm ever to hit the Florida Panhandle. If you've been over that area since the storm, you understand the devastation that took place. Our wake-up call came in 2017. Am I getting the dates right? That's in 2018 was Michael and Florence. I apologize, I haven't quite shifted to 2019. But happy 2019 we hear. And 2017 was our wake-up call in Jacksonville. With Hurricane Irma, we realized that sea level rise is not just a beach issue. It's not just a coastal issue or intercoastal. It is a Northeast Florida issue. When Hurricane Irma hit 70 miles west of Jacksonville, our community was inundated with Category 3 storm surge, even though it was shy of a Category 1 70 miles west. Inadequate infrastructure made the damage even worse, turning our river, our tributaries, and our communities into a toxic soup of sewage and industrial waste. It's now time to learn from past mistakes. For more than a century, Jacksonville has continuously deepened and straightened the St. Johns River to allow better access for ships with a blind eye to the risk. As reported by the Florida Times-Union, a deeper and more efficient channel has allowed salt water to move further up the St. Johns River, bringing the Atlantic Ocean to our doorstep in downtown Jacksonville. Higher water levels and higher storm surge in our river increase the risk of flooding to our homes, our businesses, to our communities, and public infrastructure. The current plan to dredge the St. Johns River an additional 7 feet will only make the problems worse and will accelerate the impacts of sea level rise on the St. Johns River and downtown area by nearly 25 years. So we have a choice to make. We can aggressively work together to make us as competitive and resilient to the challenges of the 21st century, or we can sit idly by and allow our community to become more vulnerable. We believe there's only one choice to make. And that's why we're here tonight to visit, to figure out how we can start aggressively taking advantage of the opportunity before us. So without further ado, I want to invite our panel up, Dr. Clint White and journalist Chris Hong. And as soon as they make their way up, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves to you. And starting with Chris. Chris is one of the co-authors of As an Ocean Creeps In. If you haven't read the article, I would urge you to do so. But it was an in-depth look at what past dredging and how it's made us more vulnerable. So Chris, I'll start with you. If you could introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the inspiration of the piece of the investigative work by the TU.
Yeah, certainly. I'm Chris Hong. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. After Irma happened and we saw the flooding downtown, there's kind of some water cooler discussions and people around the office and full reporters, including my colleague Nathan Rose out here. We were asking ourselves, what impact has the dredging had on the vulnerability of storm surge and the riverfront downtown and other low-lying areas along the river? And, we asked that question because the Army Corps of Engineers has never done some sort of holistic study on all the changes and how that's affected, the storm surge flooding risk. And so, we asked that question and we set out to find it, and answer it, and we actually found a pair of researchers up from Portland State University in Oregon, and they actually found some preliminary evidence that they say they interpret as evidence that storm surge risk has increased because of the deepening of the river. So we went with that and we poured into some more Army Corps documents, and we talked to those researchers, and they helped us explain kind of the hydrological phenomenon that they hypothesize as increasing the flood risk.
Thank you, Chris. Dr. White, I'm sure many people in the audience know you, but tell everyone else that may not a little bit about yourself and why it's so important to have this conversation tonight.
Well, hi, I'm Quentin White, Professor of Biology and Marine Science at Jacksonville University and Executive Director of the Marine Science Research Institute. And I know a lot of you from a variety of activities we've had, I'll put it that way. I got to JU in 1976. Thought I'd be there for 2 years. Sort of fell in love with the river and my wife. And actually, if she was here, I had to save my wife first in the river. But she's not here, so got introduced to manatees. Just began to really enjoy Jacksonville, what was going on. But at the same time, became pretty alarmed. I got here about the same time that Hans Tanner was skiing in the river. Because I began to realize that at the time we were dumping something like 18.5 million gallons of raw sewage into the water. And we started cleaning that up, and then it was like one thing after another, and we began to realize that we had this huge water hyacinth problem. We were spraying pesticide or herbicide to get rid of that. All these things were happening. So I began studying the river. It's a fascinating river. I mean, it's just amazing. And I actually got my PhD working on mole crabs, the Emerita talquita, the little sand fleas, pompano bait, that are out there. And so I started doing that here. So I've always had this sort of link to the river and the water, and have tried to be the balance, if you would, where you talk about facts and have done a lot with regulatory agencies and scientists and the general public, trying to explain things in an understandable manner. And I continue to be alarmed because we see evidence of things happening, and yet, regretfully, our elected officials don't seem to want to pay attention. And I think part of it is term limits. It's probably not going to happen on their watch, they hope. But as we watch sea level rise, we watch climate change is real, it's happening. Sea level rise is real, it's happening. Humans are contributing to it. Just exactly how much, we can debate that. But the fact of the matter is we are contributing to it. And we have got to figure out a way to minimize that. We've got to figure out a way to reduce the impact of global warming, climate change. We've always had climate change. But as we watch the data, you see it flash up on the screen. And you begin to pick up all the changes. The slide presentation is sort of rolling behind me. All the things we continue to do to our environment, and we pave it, and we dredge it, and we fill it, and then we scratch our heads and say, oh gee, we didn't do anything to change it. And, Army Corps comes in, and the St. Johns River originally was something probably in the order of 10, 12, maybe 14 feet, the deepest parts. And we've now deepened it over the last 200 years systematically. Just about every 10 or 15 years, we make it a little bit deeper. And now we want to deepen it 18% more. We're at 40 feet, we want to go to 47. And what will happen? We'll go to 47, and then a few years ago, we'll go to 50. Why? Because the Panama Canal is now at 50 feet. But it's a very complex problem, but one that we've got to take action with. And if we don't, nature's going to take care of it. And to some extent, I think it's funny. I really think insurance companies will be one to drive all of this, because many of you live in low-lying areas, and your homeowner's insurance is going to be so expensive you can't afford it, because we cannot continue to afford to rebuild and rebuild and rebuild. And it's not a question of if we're going to get hit by a hurricane and have massive flooding damage. It's just a question of when.
Thank you, Clint. This next question is for Chris. The Army Corps projects there'll be a 3 to 8 inch increase in average water levels over the next 5 years as a result of the dredging. Y'all did a great job in your article describing why deeper water invites the Atlantic Ocean in. Can you share that with the audience?
Sure, and just the 3 to 6 and in some parts 8, that's only going from 40 to 47 feet. And so, you know, the way that it was explained to us, I'm going to use a very non-scientific metaphor that was given us to explain what's going on. This is talking about from the river that Clint was describing 100 years ago to what it is now, which is essentially a super highway of water. You know, over the years, what they've done is they've continued to deepen it, and they've also straightened out parts of the river, and they've actually shortened the distance between downtown and the mouth of the ocean by, you know, a couple miles. But the way, you know, the way I like to describe it, and the way we describe the story, is imagine walking down a path in the woods. You got like a single track, you know, hiking trail with roots and sticks. You're going to have a harder time, you know, walking or riding your bike down there. And then imagine that compared to like a paved rail trail. You know, you have less turns, you have less things, you know, that are going to catch your tire, hit your feet, less resistance, and that's kind of what they've done in the river. It's deeper and it's more streamlined, and it acts as a very effective and efficient means of bringing water in and out of the ocean. And some proof of that, the researchers that I spoke of earlier tonight, they found some historical data from like a century ago, hidden away in some attic. It's actually kind of a cool story. But that was actually the only data they had of tidal swing levels, how much water is moving in and out during any given 6 or 7 hour tide cycle. And they found that there's a foot more of water moving in and out between the two tides. And you know, what's happening at a tide and water coming in and out, that's the same thing that happens in a storm surge. A storm surge is essentially a supercharged, you know, tidal swing. And so if they're finding if there's more water moving in any given tide swing now or tidal shift now than there was 100 years ago, that is an indicator that when a storm surge comes in, there's also going to be more water coming in and out.
So when the Army Corps talks about the project, they say, well, it's just a couple inches. Dr. White, this one's for you. I mean, should we worry about inches? Do inches really matter when it comes to water level changes?
Yeah, it really is a matter of inches. Part of the problem is that Florida is so flat. The St. Johns River flows 310 miles out of the mountains of Florida. Which basically is about a 27-foot sandhill. And almost all of that drop is in the first 100 miles of the river. And so the last 200 miles is very flat. And so just a little bit of water spreads a long way. And you know, here on the beaches, you know, I'll sort of point out part of our problem is that we have pushed the limits of development out to the barrier island, to the primary dune line. And we've destroyed our primary dunes. And it's a very complex thing, but the fact that we put the jetties in the St. Johns River stopped the normal flow of sand that moved north to south. And so the reason we see sand building up on the north side in Fort George Inlet and Wards Bank and Huguenot Park and that area, and accumulating there and eroding away here in the beaches area is because of the jetties. These got built 125 years ago in the late 1800s. And so this is gradually eroded away on our beach. We gradually eroded away the sand dunes. And so it's sort of a, we talk about this just being a river phenomenon, but no, it really is a beaches, northeast Florida phenomenon. We also sit in sort of a bow area. If you look at the coastline, and some people think this protects us from hurricanes. It really doesn't. It's just we've been fortunate because one of the things that we're looking at is a relatively short period of time. And it's hard for us to comprehend long periods of time. 50, 100 years is a long time to most of us. And so we looked at what's going on. And we've got to become more intelligent and be willing to think about our environment. I know people want jobs and they want a healthy economy, but tied to the healthy economy is a healthy environment. Nobody wants to come live in Mexico Beach right now because it's gone. And it may happen to Neptune and Atlantic and Jacksonville Beach next year. We just don't know.
Well, on that note, let's talk a little bit about resiliency. Chris, what do we do?
I missed that.
I just said on that note, let's talk about resiliency. Chris, our Jacksonville elected leaders, are they taking resiliency seriously? Are they taking the necessary steps? If so, how? And if not, what should they be doing?
Can't speak to how they think about it and how they view the problem, but if you use actions as a metric to that question, no, they're not. They're really not doing anything. I think it's on the minds of some people, and I think there's some sort of effort within City Hall to maybe tackle that, but it's not coming from the administration. It's not really coming from the City Council. So yeah, I mean, one example that Nate always likes to bring out is at the stadium, they're going to take an elevated road that's right by the river, and they're going to pay $14 million to put it at ground level. Now, I mean, that's just a small portion of that road, and they're doing that for economic development reasons, but it kind of goes to the mindset of, that river is a ticking time bomb. It's getting higher every 10 years. It could, flood everywhere around there if a bad storm comes through. I think it's kind of telling in a way that the city is about to make a once-in-a-generation type of investment in that area around the stadium. They're going to do it with Shotcon's money, but they're going to invest a significant portion of their money too. And that is, that's right next to the river. It's flood prone. It's, it will be underwater if there's ever a storm like Irma again. And I haven't heard anything about what they're going to do to make that area resilient. I'm sure Shotcon, it's on his mind. He's not a stupid guy. He's about to put a lot of his own money there. So I would imagine maybe he has some sort of plan, but I don't know what City Hall's going to do. And, our mayor doesn't really like to talk about climate change or resiliency or really anything related to the river, being filled with water and flooding everywhere around it. So yeah, like I said, their actions are the metric. It would be easy to think that they don't care about it.
Clint, that being the case, what can we do to spark a sense of urgency into our Jacksonville elected officials?
Well, I'm happy that some of the elected officials here, because I think, and you guys are the ones who care, but you also have got to be thinking about what you're going to do and how you're going to handle storm surge, and what you're going to do about property values, and how you're going to handle evacuations, and what are we going to do about the economic problems that are going to face us. It's not an easy problem, and that's part of the reason nobody wants to tackle it. This is a very difficult problem, because most of us like where we live, and we don't want to think that we're going to be forced out of it because of sea level rise. And yet, there's some of us in this room that will probably, if you live long enough, will probably be forced to move from where you live. And so we've got to start looking at building permits, and you've got to start strengthening the building codes. We've learned a lot from hurricanes, and if you saw some of the coverage going in Mexico Beach, the house that survived. Why? It was built to withstand a Hurricane 5, a Category 5 hurricane. When Irma came up the coast, Mote Marine Lab down in the Keys had just built their new lab down there, and they built it to withstand a Hurricane 5 hurricane. Guess what? It survived. We can build things to survive, but guess what? It costs money. But our local leaders have got to be willing to swallow the pill and sort of say, look, we've got to have stronger building codes. We've got to have elevated homes if we want to live in these low-lying areas. Or we've got to say, no, I'm sorry, you cannot live there because you cannot build it strong enough because it's not going to last. So there are things you can do, but it's not simple.
Can I add one thing? Sure. There's a city election in less than 80 days, so I think there might be a challenger against the mayor, and there's going to be some city council seats up for grabs. I don't think the Beaches city council member will be an opponent, but there are elections, and that's the best way to get these people's attention and tell them that you care about it. You can, God forbid, go to one of these city council meetings. At least the Jackson ones, they're awful, but I'm just kind of kidding. But you can write them letters, you can call them, you can email them. I think if enough people show up or they hear from enough people, I think that grabs their attention. That's what I hear. But yeah, that's another way to get their attention.
Go ahead.
I'm just like, we also have to begin thinking about things like our water treatment plants and our sewage treatment plants. This is a huge problem. And what we have experienced up and down the coast is when these storm surges come in, we have typically built our wastewater treatment plants down close to the water in order to get rid of the waste cheaply. And now some municipalities, St. Augustine for instance, there's a municipality of 14,000, 15,000 people that's facing I think it's a multi-million-dollar impact of having to move their wastewater treatment plant because it's getting flooded. And it's not getting flooded during storms, it's getting flooded during normal high tides. And so, we're seeing this happen again and again and again, and we cannot continue to stick our heads in the sand and say, oh, I hope it doesn't happen on my watch.
Do you remember how close the JDA facility was to flooding? It
was within inches.
Yeah, I mean, it was, during Irma, it was very, very close, which is another reason why inches matter.
Well, inches do truly matter, and leadership matters. And I do want to echo what Quinn said. It's so enlightening to see so many elected officials here tonight. And I think the beach is just showing real leadership in this conversation. But we need to work together across Northeast Florida because to get to the real planning processes and these big time action items where we can make a difference, it's going to take all of us. And so thank you all for coming. I want to open the floor up now for questions or comments. And then we have some action items for you all to help us with in a bit. Yes, sir.
What do you actually think you can do to prevent flooding?
To prevent flooding, I don't think there's anything you can do. I mean, because if you think about it, that water coming in from the ocean, it's going to go in the river. And all the water that comes from the sky during the rain, it's going to go in the river. I mean, there's steps you can take to make the places we care about near the river more resilient. I mean, you can raise the roads. You can, New York City has done a number of things that Lisa can tell you about. But I mean, in order to even answer that question, you gotta have a conversation. And I haven't seen that conversation happen yet. Got anything to add?
And if I could just add, and he's right, it's really planning to deal with the rising waters, and that's what we're seeing communities that we compete with. That they're starting to talk about how do they plan in a way that can absorb the impact and protect our homes and our businesses.
Miami Beach raised their roads 2.5 feet in the last 10 years because in a regular high tide, you had 6 or 8 inches of water coming out of storm drains.
And that's the concern in some of these older areas of Northeast Florida as the river rises due to sea level rise and overnight due to the dredging, all of a sudden we'll see sunny day flooding in some of these areas. Quentin, do you have something to add?
Yeah, no comment. The trouble is you really cannot battle flooding per se very easily. You really cannot build a wall because in many cases the water is not coming horizontal, it's coming vertical, it's coming up from the bottom. And Miami figured this out. They had a proposal to build $1 billion seawall around Miami and then realized, whoops, we're sitting on porous limestone. That doesn't do anything for us. So you've got to lift it up. But I really think it's a case of planning and anticipating flooding and strengthening the building codes and zoning to keep people out of harm's way. Some people won't like it. They think they want that view, they want that piece of land, but it's also not fair to us as taxpayers to turn around after it gets flooded and say, oh yeah, and you're going to help me pay to rebuild it, which is where the rubber hits the road. You talked about their money a while back ago. It's not their money, it's our money. And all disrespect to Mr. Khan, he doesn't do anything to make money.
And one thing that's important to our waterways is strengthening our natural buffers. The more we can strengthen our waterways and the green space around them and our dunes and wetlands, protecting wetlands can provide a huge amount of flood control as well as water quality prevention. So we can really strengthen our natural defenses as well, which will protect us in extreme conditions, but then also provide us an enhanced quality of life under normal conditions. Matt Carlucci.
I'm Stan, if that's okay. I don't want to turn this into a political commercial. But I tell you what, I want to make the point this. I think that the next council, whoever gets elected, whether I am or I'm not, no matter who, is going to make this a priority. And I think it's in large part due to the Times-Union, the coverage, the Riverkeeper, and the fact that I'm also in the insurance business and I handled over 500 flood claims between Hurricane Matthew and Irma. And I have been talking about if we get hit with a Hurricane Cat 2 off the Atlantic and hits the Atlantic, people don't know, but somebody said it earlier, the Buckland sewage, so I'm making a comment, I'm not asking a question. But the Buckland sewage plant is right where a lot of that storm surge will hit. And those pools could be breached very easily. And people won't be swimming for touchdowns, they'll be swimming for touchdowns at the stadium. They won't be running for them, they'll be swimming for them. And one of the things that I would advocate for, whether I am elected or not, but that is not a 90-day or 6-month committee, but a task force made up of smart people that know what they're doing. A few council members sprinkled in so that they can, you notice I separated the two of them, don't you? But I've been fleshing this out a long time, and I think Lisa and Quinn can attest to this because I've been to their offices and I've spoken to them. But we've got to have a continual annual committee task force of some sort, and that's what I'm advocating for with leadership, so that if I happen to get elected, this is a huge issue and it's going to take a huge amount of money. How do you keep some of these flooding from happening? Well, Dr. Quint White told me that there's a lot of our tributaries around that if you dredge them out, not deeper, but to their original depth, that would take a lot of water that would be coming into people's homes. Like in San Marco, in the area that I live. The beaches have got a whole different problem because you don't have tributaries to soak up. You've got one big one, St. John's River. So the better job we do with the river, hopefully the better job that would do with the ocean front. But this is a combination of the ocean, the St. John's, the tributaries, all in North Florida, and really the whole North Carolina, the whole St. John's River plain. I apologize for taking a long time, but I think this is an issue that the new council, no matter who it is, might be my opponent. It doesn't matter. But we've got to advocate for it because I'm just telling you, Hurricane Irma was bad, but there's a lot worse that could happen. And downtown will be underwater, Springfield will be underwater, the beaches will be underwater, and people will be stunned, absolutely stunned. And that's all I got to say.
Mr. Carlucci, while we got you here, I'm going to put you on the spot.
So nice to be here, and I'll see you.
You know, there's going to come a time, the dredging has technically already started. I was out there fishing the jetty Sunday, and the crane was out there, water quality's on that stuff. So, but anyway, but that's just a small portion of what's going to happen. There's going to come a time where the city is going to have to probably put a significant amount of money towards this project if it's going to happen. I mean, are you willing to say, are you willing to vote for that money if it doesn't contain a significant chunk of projects for mitigation and the work that you're talking about right now? Is that a non-starter for you, or I mean?
Well, let me answer the question straight on. But I've got to say this first. There's two big issues in Jacksonville that are not being paid attention to. And one is this one, right here. But the other one is 40% of Jacksonville, and maybe the beaches, but I know in the core Jacksonville population that are working are living either this much or at or below the poverty level. And that connects with crime. So, yes, I would support the dredge because of jobs. And we've got to provide people with more opportunities. But if we're going to do that, we've got to do the things that will mitigate the effects of the dredge. I don't deny what the dredging will do. But I'm trying to handle both issues.
Sure.
So as an elected official, I can dig my heels in and say, I'm not voting for it, and it's probably going to happen anyway. But a lot of the people that are for the dredge, I want them helping with the mitigation dollars that are going to be needed, which is far greater than what we have now, and to hopefully create jobs for those families, many of which are single mothers who would like their kids just to be able to ride their bicycle to school. But we've got to start providing more opportunities in that deeper reach into our communities that are at risk and vulnerable. So to me, it's a little bit of a balancing act. That's a straightforward answer. It's a global type of approach, in my view.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Got you, and then I'll come to you, Sarah.
Hey, my name is Paul Nicholson. My question is, in all the discussions that I've been hearing, we're talking about moving water around in a bowl that's a certain amount filled. We're filling the bowl. So, one, where do you think the water's coming from to make flooding that much more of a problem? And two, why do I never hear a renewable portfolio standard or some method at a governmental level or even at an increased community participation level where we reduce the amount of energy that we consume that's fossil fuel based?
Second question, it's well, my favorite, I think. But I mean, the water's coming from, the ocean. NOAA estimates that sea level rises an inch every 10 years, at least in this part of Florida. And then, during a hurricane, the water is just getting pushed off into the river. And, it's easy to kind of forget about that. When you go 7, 8, 9, 10 years without a major hurricane, it kind of goes in the back of your head. You're worried about your job and everything else. And then 2017 happens, and, Irma reminds us that we're very much, at risk of this type of flooding.
Now, sea level rise is coming primarily from melting ice, as we see a global warming phenomenon. There's a good news part of this, in that we are actually moving away from burning fossil fuels. However, we're not doing it fast enough. Renewable energy is coming, and it's coming, but not as fast as we need for it to come. We got to maintain the power grid, but we need to encourage our elected officials to support wind and solar energy and move away from burning fossil fuels. Coal is dying. It's nothing. It's dead. It's going away. Right now we're sort of limping along on gas and natural gas, but eventually you're going to have to switch over to solar and wind. I think it's just a matter of time. I was out in Texas not long ago, and here's a state that's known for gas and oil, and yet I saw the biggest solar farm I had ever seen and the biggest windmill farm I've ever seen. And, kudos to them. And it's sort of amazing that Rick Perry, as governor out there, actually promoted more of that kind of stuff. They're ahead of the rest of us, and we need to, we're in the Sunshine State, and, it's regretful that I looked at putting solar when we built an SRI. I couldn't pay for it. The way the JEA rate structure was, you can't recoup the money. And so we've got to put pressure on elected officials to change that. We've got to make it so it makes sense for us all to have solar panels on our roofs. And we've got to think about, not filling in wetlands. And Matt Felicia mentioned that I'm a big advocate of what I call eco-restoration for tributaries. Because of the sediment that runs off of our roads and our lawns and our leaf clippings, we have gradually filled in all of our tributaries. We need to go in and dredge those back out. Dredge is not necessarily a dirty word. We can go in and eco-restore those areas so they can have more capacity. And we can restore some of those wetlands. And that will give us some buffer. We just can't continue to fill in these wetlands and pay over paradise, which is what we're doing.
Sarah?
First, shout out for you all doing this. This is great. We need to have continual dialogue. I have two scientific questions, but I have a couple of kind of follow-up questions that have been talked about. Miami Beach, in addition to raising its roads, it also passed a very robust building ordinance of the first floor being floodable for all building structures 7,000 square feet or higher. And the city engineer said this is maybe going to buy us 20 years, but we don't want to spend the next 20 years rebuilding. We want to spend 20 years thinking about it. So that's one of the solutions. Now, it's extreme for them, but they were playing pretty consistently. Some action items, which you guys probably know, but reduce our impervious surface, for sure. The city of Jacksonville still has a sustainability ordinance, executive order on the books that has not been redacted. We can call for that. Aaron Bowman and Todd Sack was a former environmental board protection, has been calling for an energy and resiliency commission. It's highly needed. It needs to survive administrations. And then there's PACE, Property Access Clean Energy, is a financing tool to help you put solar on your home. It's been sitting in OGC for, I don't know, 3 years. And it's a tool that's working all over Florida, and solar adoption is going way up because of it. And then a quick shout out to the city of Atlantic Beach for working on the LEED for City certification. So my 2 questions are, Clint, can you help me understand, is there any concern locally about water table? This is not my forte, so excuse the ignorant scientific question, but with sea level rise happening, I'm assuming the pressure gets heavier, right? And so that affects our aquifer. And I know we have a Hawthorne clay layer, but what are the risks there? And then my second question, all this dredging that's off the beach, and I've rewatched the beach, so I love the dunes, thank you for guidance for the dunes. But digging a hole south of the jetties, and isn't that causing more, like a bad cycle of losing more and more sand? Again, 2 very novice scientific questions that I don't know.
Let's see, I need a whiteboard in an hour and a half. Okay. The whole water table, water and aquifer is a whole different topic from what we're dealing with right now. In terms of sea level rise is impacting it, yes. But the Florida aquifer is recharged by rain. And what's ironic is that we're paving over areas that recharge. And so not only are we pulling more water out of the Florida aquifer than is going in, we're turning the faucet off of going back in by paving over areas. So your advocacy for impervious or creating pervious surface is where we need to head. You need to have more retention ponds. You need to have less paved area that gets that water to the river as fast as it can. And so again, it's sort of a complex situation. I'm sorry, what was the second question?
So dredging, so the pressure of more water on top is not a problem?
Not really.
Okay, and then just the dredging, the sand thing?
The beach renourishment.
Offshore Florida.
Where is the dredging of the sand for beach?
Yeah, I'm sorry, okay.
Causing exacerbated problems?
Yeah, the adage I use, everything has to be somewhere. And so when you pull it out of the ocean and deposit it back on shore, yeah, the sand's going to flow back into that. But the Corps actually is doing a pretty decent job on that piece of it, in that the Barlow area they're using is far enough offshore that it's not a real direct relationship. It's a very dynamic system and very complex, but it'll gravity fill in, but it's not pulling sand off the shore to go out and fill that in.
We're going to have one more question over here, then we're going to have some action items, and then we'll open the floor back up for questions to make sure we address everything on the floor. Yes, sir.
Rick Carter, a question about eco restoration, orders of magnitude. One of the slides up here is a pearl necklace. There's going to be some eco restoration. On an order of magnitude, how many of those do we need to do to have any impact? Because I've seen some very substantial costs just for that one.
Good question. I don't know the answer to that. But I guess I would argue that every little bit helps. And so you just keep it step by step by step. We've come a long way in retention ponds, for instance. I can remember 25, 30 years ago when you told developers that they needed to retain the first half-inch or inch of water running off their property, they were just adamant, oh, we can't do that, it'll kill us. Then they discovered that if they dig ponds right and put the blocks right, they created waterfront property, and the price went up. Oh, we can do that, yeah, that's fine. And so it began to work. I can tell you some funny stories about some development we did along the beach one time, and we were advocating for indirect light and dark windows that would not allow the light to impact the beach to protect sea turtles. And again, initially the developer said, oh, no, we can't do that, until the engineers came back and said, oh, by the way, when you darken those windows, it also reduces the heat load on the condo, and it's reduced their energy cost. And the marketing people came back and said, oh, by the way, and people love that indirect lighting, and we can sell it. And so I can show you some developments around it that developer initially said, oh, no, we can't do that, and realized, oh, wait, you can market that, you can make it work. And so I think this is where we just need that collective wisdom that we have sometimes to think through these things and think, you know, this works. It's not always the easiest, cheapest, best, may not be the best way to do it.
One advantage of being a little bit behind the curve on this is there's other cities that are showing that you can protect your community and have a good return on the investment. And so there's some real exciting projects out there that we've been sharing. Urban Land Institute has Harnessing the Value of Water. It's a new study they did. If you like this subject, Google that. It's a fantastic, fantastic study. There's a young lady that had a question over here. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to look over you.
So since you guys think that City Council isn't focusing on sort of environmental impacts, like short-term solutions, like 10, 15 years, do you think they should focus on and implementing now while long-term solutions are being developed?
I think one thing that if the city council wanted to actually move the needle and get some money towards these mitigation projects, whether it's the environmental impacts of the dredge or if it's some of the storm surge and flooding resilience projects, again, they need to attach it to the money that they're going to have to inevitably pay towards the dredging project. I mean, that's the time to do it. If they're going to try to piecemeal it year after year after that, one project at a time, that money's just never going to, get in the budget. I mean, Mr. Carlucci made a good point. I mean, there's also a lot of other priorities and things that the city council's trying to do. I think attaching to that big spend of money that they're going to have to make in the next 4 years is the best opportunity to do it. So, I mean, that's kind of, that lacks the specific work that they should do, but I think whatever they do, it needs to be attached to the money that they're going to have to pay towards that project.
There are some short-term issues of wetland protection, and that's one thing. Right now, if we have a no-net wetlands loss policy that we actually adhere to, that's a very simple way of protecting against future flooding. We will take some more questions, but I want, before anyone has to leave at the 8 o'clock hour, to introduce Shannon Blankenship. She's our advocacy director, and let me tell you, your actions really matter. It's making a difference. We're having a more robust conversation about resiliency more than ever because people just like you have engaged, and she's going to share with some ideas of how you can engage tonight moving forward. So please welcome Shannon Blankenship.
And thank you guys all so much for coming out and being passionate about this topic just as much as we are. We have some actions that we're asking of so many people in one room tonight. So before you leave, if you're willing to take them, that would be excellent. On the back table, the first thing I have, and future City Councilman Matt Carlucci alluded to this, but it's a petition to demand that if the dredging project is to move forward, that it's attached to mitigation funding, to ensure that we're trying to adequately address the harms that we know through Nate's reporting and research from Dr. White that will happen to the river. So the petition is back there, and more signatures for that is great. We also have an online petition on change.org. You can Google the same thing, St. John's River dredging, and demanding that mitigation. We also have letters that we have crafted for folks to be able to send to our elected leaders that have specific affiliations right now where they can take action that will help some of these issues. Because we know we have a robust election that's about to take place in the city of Jacksonville, raising questions about resiliency at town halls is key. But the letters that we have back there are going to address our federal leaders, like John Rutherford and Al Lawson, both of whom have met with us on this particular issue, both of whom are willing to take action on this issue, but hearing from the community as well is going to help them to put that higher up on their plate, to help them to take action quicker, asking them to get federal dollars for more local resiliency projects. And so those letters are going to be key for them. Locally, we also have City Council President Aaron Bowman, who is currently tasked with, we heard about this earlier too, these different task forces that can help with some of the long-term solutions to these issues. And so if you're really going to have long-term issues, you need to make sure you get the right people around the table. So we're asking for a sense of urgency in the creation of these task forces and a balanced approach to the people that are on the task force to ensure that we have a community solution for resiliency long-term. If you use social media and you have anything from tonight too, we're using the hashtag River Uprising. And then we also have, following these town halls, several more citizen advocacy-based trainings, individualized presentations, and ways that we can continue this conversation so that we're talking about solutions, we're educating people that want to know more about the problems, and we're making sure that we're addressing the concerns of the community, because we're not hearing from our elected leaders what their solutions are putting forward. So the more people we can get talking about these things, the more we can start demanding some of those solutions for our elected leaders. I'll turn it back over to questions from Lisa and our panelists, but I encourage everyone to check the back table for some of those actions, and thank you all so much for your support. This issue really is critical.
Let me add to that a little bit. Lisa mentioned this a little bit. There's that flyer on the back table. But Tuesday night at JU, we're going to have a public forum entitled Hurricanes and Sea Level Rise, What Does the Data Tell Us? JU, actually UNF also, is a member of a group called SECORA, S-E-C-O-O-R-A, which stands for the Southeast Coastal Ocean Observing Regional Association. It's a mouthful. But it's all of the state, federal, local agencies around the Southeast and universities that gather data. You can actually Google SECORA, S-E-C-O-O-R-A, and you'll see a data portal. They do a lot of information, sea level rise, actually I should say just water levels, temperature, wave action, storms, barometric pressure. If you're sort of a data geek, which I'm sort of, it's a great place to go. They put out, when we have a hurricane, it's a great place to go because they'll have the real-time data of what's actually going on, the wind speeds and things like that. It was fascinating watching Matthew, Irma, and Michael over the last few years. But this will be at JU in the Gooding Auditorium. We'll start at 6. There'll be some light refreshments. At 6:30 we'll have the program. We'll wrap up about 8 o'clock. We'll have some speakers, and you'll learn about what the data is telling us about hurricanes and sea level rise. So a little
and I do encourage you to attend. The data is so critical. It's very hard to debate the data, and especially when you look at things like in downtown, since the 70s, the average level of the river's risen 5 inches. I mean, the data, it doesn't lie, and so this is great information that will be much broader than that point. I saw a couple other hands up. Do you have some other questions? Yes, sir.
We know that Savannah has already increased to 50 feet. We know Charleston's at 50 feet. We know that jointly they're talking about a new port in between them that's going to be at 50 feet. We're talking about going to 47 feet. Is there any empirical data that that's going to improve our economic impact and is going to produce jobs and make us competitive against those 3 ports, which will be closer inland and will be deeper than we are?
I mean, technically, yeah. I mean, they had to justify the project with cost-benefit analysis. There have been a lot of people who have raised some, who say that there are some major concerns with that analysis, and that if you move the numbers around, that the project doesn't make financial sense. And what you said is totally valid. It seems to be a conversation that City Hall has not went ahead in the last 4 years. You know, how is this going to make how Jackson competitive? Like, what's going to happen when these other courts are already ahead of the court? Our court will be after our new project's done. But like again, the last 4 years, that conversation just hasn't been happening. And you know, Jacksport, you know, they put their own money towards this project to get it going before they even got the money from the federal government. So they're intent on going full steam ahead, and that's their strategy is once you started, you can't really go back. And I think we're kind of, at least our leaders are way past the stage of wanting to have the conversation that you brought up.
I would have sat on, but Mayor Brown had a task force for harbor deepening, and we sat on that and got disbanded when Mayor Curry came into office. And I learned more about shipping and what have you, and I was never convinced that the economic benefits are there. You know, Matt Curry used to talk about wanting jobs. This is not a job generator. Why? Because once you, even if you deepen the harbor, you still got the same bottleneck of intermodal transportation getting those goods out of Jacksonville that you have today. And the reason Savannah and Charleston are beating us is because 20 years ago, Savannah put their money into distribution centers and infrastructure, and now as a dredge, they're growing so much faster than we are. It's not percentage-wise because they're so much bigger, but numerically they're going faster than we are. And we talk about Jacksonville growing so fast, and it really isn't. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors with this. And so I would advocate that we don't spend $1 million and a half dredging the river, but that we invest in the infrastructure to start getting those trains out of Jacksonville faster and a more direct route. Because right now, a cargo comes in on a container and is offloaded onto a truck, taken by the truck over to the rail terminal, taken off the truck to go to the rail terminal, and then moved someplace. Every time you touch that, it costs money. And if you take it straight off the trip and onto the rail and get out, which is what Charleston and Savannah are doing, then why do they want Savannah and Charleston? Because it costs us. We're going to deepen the port, we're going to spend all this money, and we're not going to see the economic benefit. Now, that's my prediction. But I'm only a marine biologist.
Are there any other questions or comments over here? I'm going to take Janet and then David. Janet?
You mentioned that one of the actions is a letter requesting that if they do approve the Jacksport dredging, that there be an adequate amount of money for mitigation. Is there a list of mitigation activities and costs that we think is in proportion to the risk that we would be sustaining? After you guys have done such a good job of outlining how bad that risk is.
Yes, we've actually been negotiating with the Army Corps as well as Jacksport and the City of Jacksonville for, 6 years now, I think, Clint. Early on, there was an $80 million budget with a list of projects associated with that. Then that was value engineered out of the project, and now there's less than 3. Clint mentioned the Mayor's Port Task Force, and as part of that work that existed under Mayor Brown, they actually identified a $50 million mitigation budget and actually endorsed that. The Times Union has endorsed that in previous times. They just recently had an editorial focusing on mitigation dollars. But there's tributary restoration, there's pollution reduction projects, resiliency projects, green infrastructure. There's a whole laundry list of projects that's not a silver bullet. We're not going to be able to stop the damage, but it can definitely lessen the impact. And what we know now with the flooding, there's more things we can do to strengthen our natural defense system like our wetlands. So there are projects, there are dollar figures. Every time we've been able to get something improved, it's been valued engineered out.
Lisa, the remaining $3 million that's there, that's not for any work, that's for monitoring, correct?
No, actually, they did buy some conservation land.
Okay.
And conservation land is fantastic. Our river and our waters in Florida depend on conservation land as buffers. But when you buy existing conservation land that's existing, is currently pristine, it's not adding any net benefit. It's not improving the status quo, so it's not offsetting the impact. And it's a very small portion. What the Corps is doing, the majority of their focus is monitoring to say, well, if after the fact the damage is as bad as it can be, we'll study it some more. And then if we can prove the damage is due to the dredging, then we'll go back to Congress and try to get more money. But the Army Corps told me you can't prove it's the dredging because with sea level rise and everything else going on, there's too much noise in the system. So that's really smoke and mirrors as well. And unfortunately, the Corps is starting to take that approach on all of their projects. It's the wait and see attitude, which you can't undo it once the damage is done. David?
Dave Ruderly. There is a leverage point here with the City Council, and that is that the paper this morning reported that JEA received 6 proposals to build a new headquarters, and 2 or maybe 3 of those sites are near the football stadium on the river, which will be in this vulnerable flood area. I think, and the board, according to the paper, is on track to take staff recommendations that are going to be developed over the next couple of weeks and act on those recommendations at the February board meeting to approve a project. And I think the leverage here, to use a Trump term, is to hold that project hostage by having public outrage to delay the decision until this Energy and Resilience Commission has had a chance to be formed and to come up with a plan for how do you do waterfront, riverfront economic development using public monies. Because this is going to be built into your rate base for your JEA. And I think JEA has some other things that they should be doing, like developing, and the new director, Aaron Zahn, has said he wants to do this, is to develop a 22nd century business strategy for JEA that will be able to react, be proactive in dealing with this climate chaos, even though he's not allowed to use the word climate in his job. But he does understand carbon metrics, and I've had conversations with him about perhaps he could be a little bit more proactive in working with some of the accountants that are running the city to start accounting for carbon pollution and as well as nitrogen pollution, and developing a plan that would be take this whole community into a 22nd century economic development strategy. And I want to amplify also what Quentin said about the economic feasibility of the deep dredge. A year ago, over the past year, I had the opportunity to visit 65 ports on a round-the-world cruise with the Viking company. And I will tell you that the ports that are being dredged today are 60 feet deep. And the reason they're 60 feet deep is that the ships that are being launched today, the supersized container ships, are drafting 55 feet. They're coming out of South Korea, China. And they're designed for the transoceanic cargo routes that JEA or JAXPORT is trying to capture. And the problem is the 47-foot depth is based on ships that were launched 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago. They call them a workforce ship. Those ships are now functionally obsolete and will be replaced by newer ships that can comply with the greenhouse gas IMO standards. That if you followed the LNG project with Crowley, it was on the TV last night, for the first time it was reported on television and media in Jacksonville that these LNG ships are IMO compliant, meaning that they comply with the international treaty that mandates that ocean-going shipping reduces carbon intensity by 30% for ships that are going to be built and launched in 2025. By the time the dredging is finished, the ships that are going to be launched when this dredging is finished will need 55 feet of water if you're going to bring in cargo directly from Asia. So there's another business strategy that JAXPORT should be developing, which is building on transshipment terminals, where you take the containers in some place in the Caribbean where you've got 60 feet and you offload them, and then you use your high-speed LNG ships to cut down your travel time so you have just-in-time delivery, which is what everybody wants to do in the cargo business. Basically, JAXPORT needs Plan B, and they've adamantly refused to do it. We've begged them, we've pleaded with them. I've been trained, even Congressman Rutherford tried to get him to put some pressure on them. They don't want to do it. They're looking backwards. They need to look forward. We need a 22nd century port, and we need a 22nd century electric energy infrastructure. And that takes leadership. And that's only going to happen if every one of you picks up the phone and makes a phone call to your elected officials.
I've got 3 hands up here that I made eye contact with, so we could be real quick and we'll give real quick answers because I know people want to go home and we'll stick around. So let me let the mayor go first, and I'll grab you and I'll give you the last word.
Well, it's difficult to follow up with all of this technical expertise you guys offer, but you talked a lot about the city council. I'm not going to own the Jacksonville City Council. There are a lot of elected officials from the beaches in this room. And I can tell you in Atlantic Beach, we spent 3 hours today and identified resiliency and environmental leadership as our #1 priority in Atlantic Beach. And our approach to that is that we're just going to start talking about it. And if it's our top priority, maybe that will sort of bleed over. I know the other beach mayors are committed. It was actually Mayor Brown whose idea it was to have this sea level rise symposium in the spring, and we're just going to start talking about it. I can't offer solutions to some of these big problems, but I can tell you what we're doing in Atlantic Beach. And I see it on the calendar here for February the 6th. And I'm going to tailor my comments to what we are doing to manage stormwater, our impervious ratio, our septic to sewer program, and some acquisitions to create greater retention ponds. We are working this problem in Atlantic Beach. I can't, I'm not going to claim anything that happens outside of Atlantic Beach, but if we start, maybe the state, maybe the city will start to listen. So, and I know I can speak for the other elected officials in this room. We hear you. I mean, you got to make noise, people. But we hear you in this room. Right? Yes?
That's awesome. Thank you.
So let me just comment, this solution will come from local government. This will not come from state and federal, it will come out of local government. And that's where you need to direct your efforts.
And in Jacksonville, I feel it brewing at the beaches, and so that's really exciting. Chris, do you want to say something or can I pass?
No, you can pass it on.
Ma'am? Yes, ma'am.
So, I'm Sue from Atlantic Beach, and we've been talking about this all morning, but I wonder if you could address a few of these solutions that are being illustrated up here, and how they would be helpful if we could implement any of them here at the beach.
Pictures.
Yeah, the pictures.
Yeah, I think most of these are focused on doing living shorelines and those natural buffers. As an environmentalist, one of the things we're really interested in, what some people call green infrastructure, where you're really building up the natural systems so they can give us better defense systems. So one of the things you see in New York, the project that goes by, where they're adding parkland and green space along their waterways. Under normal conditions, it's adding wonderful green space and waterfront property. Under extreme conditions, there's vaults underneath to start taking in the water. And so it's that combination of enhancing our quality of life with green infrastructure to help make our shorelines more resilient. There's a lot of things like oyster restoration and things like that that we're seeing. There's a project down in the GTM Reserve as well as at Jacksonville Zoo. So those are the types of projects you're seeing. There's not one that's a silver bullet.
Oh, I
You start
understand.
looking at all these things, they truly add up.
Thank you.
And we can talk more about that afterwards. We'll stick around. One more question, then we'll wrap up.
So I was thinking about this because we saw Battery Park that you're showing here, where they're putting in a berm, they're trying to make it look like nature, and you're showing the East River, my home territory, where they're putting in what you're talking about. What you didn't show is Miami Beach, and you can talk about all that Miami Beach is doing, has done, but right now, to get 13 miles from the airport to the north end of Collins Avenue is 1 hour and 10 minutes on a good day because the roads are being torn up because they still need to raise the roads, improve the sewer system. George Forbes did a lot in Jacksonville Beach already about improving our sewage system. I have a question. The question is, are we just trying to survive for 5 or 10 years until somebody finally in our national government says, this is a high priority, we're sinking? That's my question.
Yes.
good. We're not seeing the leadership in other areas, so we need to make a difference now and make sure that it resonates in all the future elections, so we don't have to wait so long. And I'm sorry, I'm being cut off by our fearless leader here, Maria Martin. We will stick around, but thank you so much all for being part of this.
Thank you. If I have a hook, I would hook. Just a quick reminder, we are having, our next month is our State of the Beaches meeting where all three mayors will be here. They will be in the hot seats, so please tell your friends, tell your neighbors, and they will be the presenters then. I will close by saying, if you are able, would you please pick up your chair and take it over to the caddies so we can help put the library down before we go. Thank you again.